Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Samsung's attempt to steal the smartphone thunder from Apple. Introducing the new Galaxy Note 8 phone ahead of Apple's next big iPhone event. Plus, mutual funds take into account Uber's year of drama. Giants like Vanguard and T. Rowe Price are slashing their valuations for the ride-hailing giant, while other investors follow their lead. And as the price of Bitcoin surges, investor interest is only growing stronger. Now the question is, are we in a cryptocurrency bubble? And when could it pop? First to our lead. It is a redefining moment for the Samsung Note line as the South Korean company unveils the brand new Note 8. It's the largest Samsung phone yet and could be its most important. After last year's Note 7 exploding battery fiasco, consumers could be hesitant to pick the model back up. However, Samsung feels confident that the problems are fixed and wants to move forward with what it hopes will be its, quote, best mobile device yet. Joining us now, Bloomberg Technology, Selena Wang, who attended the event in New York earlier today, and here in San Francisco, Mark Gurman, who covers consumer tech for us. Mark, I want to start with you. Now that we've seen the official unveiling, what are your takeaways from a consumer perspective?
It's very interesting. I had a chance to play with it a couple of weeks ago. I love the bigger screen. I think that being able to replace a tablet and your computer by just one device you have with you, I think it's a great thing, and a lot of people are going to like that. And if you remember, when the Note 7 was announced, everybody loved it until it started exploding. So as long as they fix the exploding part, I think they're in good shape.
And how much do you think the exploding issues will sort of impact new sales?
It won't. It's going to be a joke for the first few weeks. When it hits stores, people are going to talk about it. People have been laughing about it for the last year. But I think in the end, Samsung's going to be laughing all the way to the bank.
Selena, you were at the event. How did Samsung sell this new phone? Did they refer to any of the drama from last year?
There was a lot of excitement at the end, a gigantic line waiting to get in hours before the event. And at the very start, they actually addressed the exploding smartphone issue. There wasn't laughter yet. They addressed it with a sense of gravitas. DJ Ko went out there, an executive at Samsung, and said, we will never forget what happened, but we thank our fans for helping to inspire us and move us forward. So a really big part of the presentation, the event, was focusing on the Note loyalists, the people who stuck with the phone even after it exploded and came back and were excited to buy the Note 8. So there was definitely a lot of excitement, and from the people I spoke to there, it seems like they emphatically think that Samsung has mostly gotten over the debacle of last year.
Let's talk about market share, Mark. Samsung regained the #1 position in the global smartphone market earlier this year, 23%. Apple, meantime, 12%. Huawei, 11%. Will the new Note 8, the new iPhone coming in September, the Essential phone, will that shake up the numbers significantly?
Well, first of all, I don't think the Essential phone is going to shake up the numbers. I think it's going to be a niche player. You've seen some of the smaller Chinese makers, OnePlus, Oppo, they're playing in that same game. I think Essential would be happy with that. They're probably not even going to get a single percentage point. Apple, these Chinese makers, to your point, Xiaomi and Huawei, they're right on Apple's back. Maybe they'll cross them, maybe they won't. We'll see. The iPhone's going to be constrained for the first few months of the launch, the premium model that is. But I think we're going to get a good indication of where the Apple versus Samsung fight's going to be, probably in around 6 months' time.
Selena, what are we seeing in terms of current estimates for sales of the new Samsung phone?
Well, it's hard to say right now, but it's probably going to top what it was for the Note 7 and also their recent S8 phone blew the previous versions out of the water. There's a lot of excitement here, and Samsung is regaining its lead as a #1 smartphone player. Estimates say that in the United States, both Apple and Samsung have about 3/4 of the market. There's a lot of stickiness to the Samsung ecosystem, and so the sales expectations are pretty robust right now.
We talked a little bit about this yesterday, Mark, but remind us where Samsung has the edge in terms of the actual features as compared to what you're expecting with the new iPhone.
That's a good question, and I think that's something not a lot of people understand. Samsung is heavily vertically integrated. So they're first with a lot of stuff. Apple was really ahead in chips, but Samsung has been ahead of the pack in some chip-related things too. Of course, the biggest things, and I hate to say this, the battery. They make some of their own components for batteries. They sell to Apple. They make displays, so they make their own screens. They also make Apple's screens. If I was in charge of Samsung, why would I want to give my biggest competitor that much priority in terms of the screens. I would want them in my products first. That's why you see all these advanced screen technologies appear in the Samsung devices even 3 and 4 years before you see it in an iPhone.
And Apple has been taking steps to sort of minimize its dependence on Samsung. Selena, what are customers most excited about? Is it the OLED screen? Is it the tried and true battery life? What do they want? Why are they buying it?
I think one of the biggest differentiators of the Note is the gigantic screen and the infinity display, the curved edge, so that you get as much room as possible. And because of that gigantic screen, you can do a lot more without having to scroll. You can launch 2 apps at the same time. So say you're on your way to work and you want to have Google Maps pulled up at the same time Spotify is going. You don't have to scroll back and forth between apps as much. There's also the dual camera lens on the back so that you can take more professional looking photos. Consumers were very excited about that at the event. It means you can have the soft focus and focus more on the figure that you were trying to take the photo of. And the other big differentiator here is that stylus. It means that you can write and draw on your phone like you're holding a pen and pad. And those are the main things that the consumers were most excited about at the event.
All right, now before you go, there is one more topic I do want to cover. The New York Times out with a story today about Apple's car plans, detailing how its ambitions have become more modest since the inception, in line with some of your reporting, Mark. Apple CEO Tim Cook revealed to us exclusively back in June his vision for Apple's role in the future of cars. Take a listen.
We sort of see it as the mother of all AI projects. It's probably one of the most difficult AI projects actually to work on. And so autonomy is something that's incredibly exciting for us. And but we'll see where it takes us. We're not really saying from a product point of view what we will do. But we are being straightforward that it's a core technology that we view as very important.
So the big question, of course, Mark, is what will they do from a product point of view, which was the one thing that he wouldn't say. The New York Times is talking about a shuttle service that will test this technology on Apple campus. What do you know about the latest when it comes to car plans? Aside from this big idea that they're focusing now on the underlying technology rather than building a car itself.
Yeah, and it was a great story in the Times by Dai Wakabayashi. Does a great job on Apple as well. And it's sort of detailed similarly to our TikTok. We had this great TikTok in October, Alex Webb and I, about how Apple started by building an electric car. They wanted to take on Detroit. They wanted to take on Tesla. They were building this car. They completely abandoned it when they hired new hardware engineers, this guy named Bob Mansfield last year. Now they're working on the underlying software, as Tim Cook told you in your wonderful interview in June. And we'll see, are they going to just continue making software and then if it gets good enough license to self-driving technology and an OS to other car makers, or will they go back and build their own car? Personally, I don't think they made that decision yet.
Really? Because the New York Times seems to believe that they have made that decision.
Well, the Times story is saying that they're using this shuttle service and they're going to use some of their software to test it, right? But we don't know what they're going to do in the long run. If they're going to have an iCar, are they going to sell that? That would be pretty cool, but who knows how expensive it would be. We'll see.
All right, well, certainly a lot of details to be reported on. I'm sure you'll bring us new details as you have them. Mark Gurman, our Bloomberg Tech consumer tech reporter, Selena Wang at the Samsung event in New York earlier today. Thank you both. Coming up, Uber's year of drama is weighing down its valuation in the eyes of mutual funds. Which funds are cutting price estimates for the ride-hailing behemoth? That is next. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Whole Foods shareholders have given a thumbs up to the $13.7 billion Amazon deal. A vote by the grocer's shareholders went as expected and moves the combination one step closer to completion. Later in the day, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission's Bureau of Competition also cleared the deal. Just last week, Amazon sold $16 billion worth of unsecured bonds in 7 parts to fund the acquisition. BlackRock, Vanguard Group, and T. Rowe Price have all lowered their Uber valuations by as much as 15%. For most of this year, the ride-hailing company, of course, has faced persistent drumbeats of bad news, lawsuits, boardroom battles. This on top of an ongoing CEO search after Travis Kalanick was ousted back in June. Uber has held up its $69 billion valuation as a sign to employees, partners, and prospective competitors that it is a transformational, once-in-a-generation company. Any evidence that Uber might be less valuable than it appears may make it harder for the company to recruit or scare off new competitors. Joining us, our Bloomberg tech reporter who covers all things Uber, Eric Newcomer, of course. So what is happening?
Yeah, I mean, sort of dual news today. These mutual funds marking down Uber, I think it was 15% Vanguard, 12% T. Rowe, and then BlackRock, it's 1%.
Just shaven off a
yeah,
bit there.
exactly. And I mean, that's sort of, it's a useful sign. I mean, especially as this sort of big SoftBank deal gets done and we don't know what the valuation for the secondary shares that are going to get bought. For people selling into that deal and people doing the selling, having these professional assessments of the company's valuation could give them a guidance.
That was my question because you've been reporting about new investor interest. Is that happening at that $69 billion valuation? And is it significant that the valuation would be flat rather than increasing?
There's certainly a strong interest from the company and insiders to see the primary valuation sort of stay at $69 billion.
So but even if it's flat, is that a good thing?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think given the circumstances, a flat valuation is probably the best they're going to get. And then, of course, it's just sort of a paper flat valuation because for the actual SoftBank is going to do it at that round and then in the secondary. So sort of in terms of what they're actually paying, sort of netted out, it's going to be a lower value.
And who's selling these shares? Are these shares coming from other investors? Are they coming from employees, former employees?
That's a big question, especially, is Benchmark doing the selling? Is Travis doing the selling? The range of sort of the secondary sale that we reported was anywhere from $2 billion to $10 billion. So you can sort of get the sense of how uncertain people are about what the appetite for selling is going to be.
Meantime, there are new numbers out from Uber showing fairly positive revenue numbers. Gross bookings up 17%, trips up 150% in the last year, losses falling. What do you make of the numbers?
Yeah, I mean, they're good. It's all about perspective, right? I mean, Uber's losing historic amounts of money. I think if you annualize the 600-something million losses they had this quarter, right? You get to like $2 billion. If you compare that to Amazon in 1999 when they had their worst EBITDA loss, it was like 300 million. So just the scale of the losses, even as they fall pretty significantly, I think it was fell 9% quarter over quarter. They're still humongous compared to sort of any company you would benchmark.
And for most of that quarter, of course, Uber still had a CEO, even though the investigation was ongoing. So it'll be very interesting to see the numbers for the current quarter.
Exactly.
CEO search, Labor Day is approaching. They had said they would have someone in place by then, or at least have voted on it. Jeff Immelt seems to be the only.
He remains the front runner.
Only name out there.
There were reports that Meg Whitman was back in the mix. We have held our tongue there, sort of purposefully. There are other outlets that have said she's definitely not in the mix. So there's a lot of confusion on that. Benchmark sort of denied the idea that they had, put her out there. So it seems like Jeff Immelt is the main candidate, but there have been these secret other candidates that are purportedly, still in the mix, and we'll see.
Do you think Labor Day is a realistic deadline? Will we know by then?
I think everybody is exhausted and would love to see a deadline met, but it requires, groups of investors that don't all get along to get along, and so hard to say whether they're going to be able to meet the deadline or not. But they're all tired and would love to see it met if everybody can get along.
I'm sure you'd love to see it met too. Eric Newcomer, who covers Uber for us. Thanks so much, Eric.
Thank you.
Well, the debate over U.S. tax reform is coming into focus as Congress is set to reconvene. U.S. House Speaker Paul Ryan was at an Intel plant in Oregon today on a tax reform business tour. Ryan saying that the current tax code is, quote, a junker and has enabled the rest of the world to catch up and surpass the U.S. He also talked about the chances of a government shutdown. Take a listen.
Well, I don't think a government shutdown is necessary, and I don't think most people want to see a government shutdown, ourselves included. And Congress in the House has already done its work on this issue.
Ryan's comments just a day after President Trump said that and threatened to bring the U.S. government to the brink of a shutdown if needed to pressure Congress into funding a border wall with Mexico. Coming up after the events in Charlottesville, Virginia, tech firms like Cloudflare, GoDaddy, and Google have all taken a stand against neo-Nazi groups. But the debate in Silicon Valley over its dealings with hate and hate groups continues. We will discuss next. And a feature I just want to bring to your attention, our interactive TV function. Find it at TV Go on the Bloomberg. You can watch us live. If you miss an interview, you can go back to it. You can send our producers a message. You can click along with the charts. This is for Bloomberg subscribers only. Check it out at TV Go. This is Bloomberg. The success of Apple's iPhone has caused a ripple effect in the airline industry. China Airlines have surged more than 30% in the last 8 days, adding more than $4 billion to its market cap. EVA Airways also had its best week in a year. The rapid gain is due to investor optimism that the airline's cargo operations will benefit from Taiwanese supplier orders by Apple. Since the events in Charlottesville, Virginia a few weeks ago, a surprising topic has come to the forefront in Silicon Valley: deep-seated divisions about how far tech companies should go to silence hate groups, specifically Nazis. Where exactly do these companies draw the line? Can and should they act on moral judgment alone? Bloomberg Businessweek's Max Chafkin explored this topic in this week's issue of the magazine. Joins us now from New York. So, Max, you point out that a lot of these CEOs, tech CEOs in particular, got a lot of praise for denouncing Nazis when that's not exactly heroic, but just sort of an obvious thing that you just do. Explain.
Yeah, I mean, one of the sort of interesting things that's played out over not just even the past couple of weeks, but the past, 6 months, is that Silicon Valley has had kind of a hard time navigating the era of Donald Trump. And that's partly because even before the election, there was all of this controversy around companies like Facebook and Google as to whether or not they were media companies or technology companies. If you're a technology company, then you don't have to take any responsibility for any of the content that's on your platform. And if you're a media company, obviously you do. And most of these companies want to be technology companies because they're valued higher. You don't have to spend as much on content moderation. And the thing that happened 2 weeks ago was that, suddenly these companies realized, hey, maybe we actually have to take at least some responsibility. And that kind of came to the forefront when Google and GoDaddy and a bunch of other companies took down the Daily Stormer, which is a Nazi publication that had basically been on the internet until then.
Right. Cloudflare was the last of those companies to finally cut off the Daily Stormer, though you can still find it elsewhere online. This is a company that's taken a more laissez-faire, free speech approach to these kinds of things. We had Matthew Prince, the CEO, on the show, and he said he's still uncomfortable with his decision to take down this site, that ultimately he did so because the Daily Stormer was claiming that they had Cloudflare's support, quote unquote, but that, he believes that no person, no company should have the power to do such a thing. Take a listen to what he had to say.
We turn to the experts in terrorism and illegal content, which is law enforcement, legislators, regulators, and we say, here is this content, what would you like us to do? That to me feels like the principle of due process, that they are actually politically enshrined organizations who can make these decisions, as opposed to these decisions being made based on what the political whims of me or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos.
Prince is sort of arguing that internet companies, Max, should be regulated more like utilities, that this decision should be out of their hands. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that he's really thought through that one, because if you're regulated as a utility, that creates he's worried about burdens as to having to check out the content on every site. However, if you're regulated as a utility, that creates a whole additional set of burdens. There are price controls and there's a whole bunch of stuff that I think if you really think through it, you don't necessarily want if you're in his shoes. The other thing I would point out is this is not something that necessarily has to be solved by law enforcement or the government. Basically, free speech lets businesses do business pretty much with whoever they want. As I point out in the article, I mean, if you own a bar and somebody is, spouting off about Nazi beliefs or whatever, you can throw them out. And in the same way, Cloudflare or Google or any of these companies can choose not to do business with anybody. And I think we've seen that that's possible in the sense that the Daily Stormer is still available. It's kind of, I'd say, a little bit grandiose to think that Cloudflare or Google or any other company has to have some kind of grand governance system to deal with the bad actors. They can just get rid of them.
Is it a slippery slope, though, Max? I mean, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of counter argument that if they get rid of the Nazis, maybe they'll get rid of the Black Lives Matter activists or something like that. And I think, frankly, that is, I don't put a lot of stock in that. I mean, the fact is that there are multiple competing companies. They all want as much business as possible. And I don't think it's too hard to see the difference between, white supremacy and some activist causes. I think we can sort of count on our business leaders to make those distinctions reliably. And I think the slippery slope argument, it mostly serves to sort of allow these tech companies to wash their hands of making some hard decisions.
All right, well, we'll see if they indeed make those decisions. Max Chafkin of Bloomberg Business Week, thanks so much. Check it out in this week's issue. Well, call it the crypto effect as chip makers ride the wave in investor demand for digital currencies. But can it last, or is it a bubble about to burst? We will discuss. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of first word news. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he and President Trump are working to prevent a debt default. A statement from McConnell adds that he, the president, and their teams are, quote, in regular contact. This comes after the New York Times reported that the relationship between the two has deteriorated in recent weeks. House Speaker Paul Ryan responded today to President Trump's threat to shut down the government if Congress doesn't fund a wall on the border with Mexico.
Well, I don't think a government shutdown is necessary, and I don't think most people want to see a government shutdown, ourselves included. And Congress in the House has already done its work on this issue.
Congress needs to pass a spending measure to keep the government open by September 30th. France's interior minister says some of the men suspected in last week's deadly attacks in Barcelona visited the Paris area 2 days beforehand. Officials are trying to determine what the suspects did while they were in Paris. Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Vatican Secretary of State Pietro Parolin in Sochi today. President Putin said that Russia values a, quote, trustful and constructive dialogue with the Vatican. President Trump's emergency management director is pushing for an overhaul of disaster relief. FEMA Chief Brock Long tells Bloomberg that states, cities, and homeowners should bear more of the costs. He says taxpayers shouldn't be on the hook for homes that keep flooding. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg.
How do you walk that line
when you're in the middle of a crisis situation?
It's really all about enabling people. Technology needs to serve everyone.
But at the end of the day, it's all about emotional decision.
I think there's huge innovation left in music.
The hallmark of a truly great leader is that great is never great enough.
For us, it's not about being first, it's about being the best.
Hi, my name's Ashley.
Hello, Ashley. I am a socially intelligent robot.
Ashley Vance is going to the farthest corners of Earth.
This is the UFO.
What am I going to find inside? You get Wi-Fi out here?
To find the mad scientists, the tech geniuses, and the dreamers of tomorrow.
It's about high-tech innovation and doing really, really clever things.
Hello, world. Friday on Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Back to our top story. Samsung introducing a new Galaxy Note 8 phone. It is a redefining moment potentially for the product line after last year's Note 7 exploding battery fiasco, the timing coming just ahead of Apple's next big iPhone event. So, how important is the phone to the future of Samsung's business? Our Bloomberg tech reporter Selena Wang went to the phone unveiling in New York earlier today, took a look at the new device.
I'm here in Midtown Manhattan for the grand unveiling of Samsung's Galaxy Note 8. The stakes are very high for this phone to succeed since it's the latest version since the Galaxy Note 7 was recalled after reports of catching on fire and exploding. Now let's go take a look at it. The Note has always been Samsung's biggest phone, one with a screen so large it's been compared to a tablet. Now that screen is getting even bigger, measuring at 6.3 inches to be exact. The Note 8 has an improved camera with 2 lenses on the back of the device. It also supports faster networking tech for browsing the web and downloading content. But the question remains, can Samsung win big with customers after last summer's Note 7 debacle? Samsung killed off the smartphone after customers reported problems of early models exploding and even the replacement phones catching fire. The whole fiasco cost the South Korean company an estimated $6 billion.
We won't really know if they've gotten over the Note 7 debacle until probably early 2018, and when the phone's been out there long enough and people have tested it.
But that's not the only problem the company faces. The de facto head of Samsung is on trial for bribery and embezzlement. Judges in Seoul will make a verdict this week.
Samsung's executive management isn't inextricably tied to the brand of the company. Other companies, for instance, Apple's Tim Cook is different, right? He represents the company, and I feel very few consumers even know who runs Samsung.
But perhaps the biggest obstacle the company faces is its competition, especially with Apple and other competitors in Asia. Apple plans to roll out its highly anticipated iPhone 8 in the coming weeks.
If you're doing feature by feature comparison and you look at what is rumored to come into the iPhone, Samsung has a very strong lineup.
Samsung regained its top spot in the global smartphone shipments earlier this year, with 23% of the market after losing ground during the Note 7 scandal. So, can Samsung hold on to its top spot in the increasingly crowded smartphone market? Only time can tell, but one thing is for sure. By keeping the same Note branding, Samsung is making clear that the Note 8 fixes any problems of the past.
Our Bloomberg tech reporter Selena Wang there in New York. Now to cryptocurrencies and the companies riding its wave of success. Both AMD and Nvidia have rallied in the past 3 months as Bitcoin has surged. Both have seen a drop the last few days tied to Bitcoin's market correction, however, with less volatility. Joining me now from London to take a deeper look at how the venture capital market is looking at cryptocurrencies, Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde in London. Caroline, take it away.
Emily, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I'm joined by Peter Denius. He's the global head of VC at Aberdeen Standard Investments. They manage more than hundreds of billions of dollars in your money, and he joins us now from New York. Peter, welcome to Bloomberg Technology. And first of all, we were just hearing there how you can gain exposure in the whole excitement that is cryptocurrencies via perhaps owning chip makers like Nvidia. You're looking at funds that are investing in blockchain startups, in ICOs, in initial coin offerings, in the digital currencies. What makes a fund stand out to you?
Well, that's a great question, Caroline. It's frankly really early days in this whole area. We're seeing a tremendous amount of excitement in innovation in cryptocurrencies, and more importantly, the underlying blockchain technology that drives and enables a lot of these currencies. Frankly, it's been pretty slow for the venture capitalists to sort of jump in and invest in the sector. We are seeing some new fund offerings, and I think, for us, it's really trying to figure out how experienced are these teams in the sector. Have they been part of the ecosystem? Have they been thought leaders in the sector? And do they have any experience in either investing in these offerings or working with the underlying companies that are behind them?
I mean, when we talk about the exuberance, the excitement, I want to show our viewers just the exuberance and excitement that we've seen in the Bitcoin price alone. I mean, we're now trading at 3 times where gold prices have been trading. If you type in G #BTV2426, you can just see this on a graphical basis. The euphoria that is there. How do you really tell the wheat from the chaff here? Interesting, we were talking about one confirmation, that's a new VC-style fund. Is it really those companies, you want them to have money in the startup, not just in the digital currency, the so-called token, the ICO that they issue?
Yeah, I think that's from our perspective, remembering that we invest in venture capital funds on behalf of our clients. And from our perspective, it seems to make a bit more sense if we have capital both in the company as well as in the underlying token offering through the fund in which we are investing in. But frankly, like I said at the outset, it's still very early days. You have so many different approaches and business models. At the underlying company level, at the token level, it's frankly still just being defined, and this is really an emerging asset class and changing literally every day.
And regulation changing every day. Talk to us about the regulatory environment, because we've seen, $1.8 billion raised in terms of initial coin offerings just this year by startups, and now the SEC is weighing in and wanting to start regulating. Will this become a global theme?
It's a good question. I think at this point, the regulatory bodies here in the U.S., obviously the SEC, has opined that some of these tokens could in fact be deemed securities, and therefore they're going to be subject to regulation. And that's frankly a good thing, because a lot of that $1.8 billion that's been raised by these offerings, we believe has been pretty fast and loose, if you will. So I think with more clarity from the SEC, we're going to see the quality bar rise, and that can only be a good thing when we talk about the long-term sustainability of this market, because we certainly don't want to see it implode with a lot of fraud and just poorly designed offerings and companies that are behind them.
Long-term sustainability of the Bitcoin price, of Ether, of these ICOs, do you see it remaining, or do you see a crash coming at some point?
Yeah, I've gotten that question before, and I tend to be more on the bearish side as it relates to the current price of Bitcoin. But I think that's really driven, frankly, by the capital that's in Bitcoin today. A lot of that capital is highly speculative capital in our estimation, because we just haven't seen a lot of institutional capital yet invested in currencies more broadly, in these tokens. And our sense is a lot of the Bitcoin price has been driven by speculation and a fear of missing out. And so I think it'll take some time for that to settle. We try and think about these markets in sort of more decade-type time frames, as opposed to yearly or certainly not even daily. And we're bullish on blockchain in general over that period of time. We think there's going to be a tremendous amount of continued innovation in this area, and that there will be an opportunity for institutional investors to continue to invest or begin to invest in the asset class.
Very similar sentiment we were hearing from just Mark Cuban yesterday, that he believes in the underlying technology, perhaps not always the assets that are being sold. But what's interesting is when you look at volumes, particularly in Bitcoin, say, about 45% today's trading volume was coming from Japan. What about the breakdown of your own clients and the interest in you at Aberdeen Asset Management, as it was, and now Aberdeen Standard Investment? How is it regionally breaking down for an appetite to get into this sort of thing?
Well, it is a global market, a global dynamic, and we do have a global investor base. And frankly, I think that investor base is looking to us to make sense of it. It's, as you know, a very confusing, highly dynamic asset class, changing literally every day. And as I said at the outset, what we're trying to discern is just how this new business model and this new asset class can impact, or will impact, or some might say disrupt, the venture capital industry, and then they're implicitly asking us to sort of make sense of that and either invest or not invest, and do so on their behalf, again, as stewards of their capital.
So we understand, of course, one confirmation is one of the new VC funds that is the seed funds looking into cryptocurrency and blockchain space. What other funds have you had your eye on, or indeed, can you tell us from a regional breakdown where the interesting funds are springing up from as well?
Most of the investment opportunities that we've seen at the fund level have been here in the U.S., and I think that makes sense given the depth of the institutional market here. We have seen some funds outside the United States, but again, we're just at the outset of this, and we're certain that more funds will be coming to market here in the next 12 to 24 months. But that's basically, it's been a U.S. phenomenon so far, for the most part.
Peter Denius, it's been wonderful having the time with you live from New York with us. Thank you very much indeed. Of course, he's head of global VC for Aberdeen Standard Investments. Thank you. Emily.
All right, Caroline in London, thanks so much. Coming up, IBM CEO Ginny Rometty is one of the most recognizable tech leaders in the world. We will hear what she has to say about advising heads of state. This is Bloomberg. Elon Musk is at it again, this time bringing us another peek at the future of space travel. The SpaceX CEO took to Instagram, writing, "First picture of SpaceX spacesuit. More in days to follow." Worth noting that this actually works, not a mock-up. Already tested to double vacuum pressure, was incredibly hard to balance aesthetics and function, easy to do either separately. The suit was developed in-house at SpaceX and will be used for manned missions in outer space. And James Damore, the engineer who was fired by Google after he criticized the company's diversity policies, has hired a notable lawyer to represent him, Harmeet Dhillon. I interviewed Damore earlier this month, and he has announced his plans to sue the company. Damore set off a firestorm with a 10-page memo blasting Google for its, quote, left bias and for the company's policies, ignoring differences between the sexes, which are widely disputed. It was widely reported months ago that Dhillon was a contender for a top job in the U.S. Justice Department. Now, to a conversation with IBM CEO Ginny Rometty. She sat down with Carlyle Group co-founder David Rubenstein in the latest episode of The David Rubenstein Show, peer-to-peer conversation. Here's what she had to say about her role on advising heads of state.
When you're meeting with President Trump or other presidents, do you see that CEOs are willing to say, Mr. President, that's not a good idea, or let me give you my thought, and it might be different than yours, or people that are kind of quiet and any president's around?
No, my experience is that people are respectfully honest and give their opinions. And so just as if there are times with whether it's a president, a prime minister, where we agree, and there'll be times we don't agree. And, you know, in our case here, as an example, with the Paris Agreement, we believed that America should stay in there. And so we shared our viewpoints on that. The issues that are important, right, to our business and our clients.
You can catch the full conversation with IBM CEO Ginny Rometty tonight on The David Rubenstein Show, peer-to-peer conversations on Bloomberg, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Coming up, does the idea that an enemy's enemy is a friend work in business? We will discuss which two companies are partnering up to take on Amazon. And a quick programming note, Bloomberg TV will have full coverage of central bank leaders meeting in Jackson Hole starting on Thursday, when we'll bring you our interview with Kansas City Fed President Esther George. Catch that conversation at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time. This is Bloomberg. Walmart and Google are teaming up in an attempt to catch Amazon. By the end of the month, by the end of next month, Walmart customers will be able to use voice-activated Google Home speakers to buy hundreds of thousands of items for delivery. And by next year, the service will include groceries and allow shoppers to pick up their orders at Walmart stores. Amazon shares slipped about 1% on the news, but will this partnership be enough for Walmart to close the gap? Here with me on the set, Arun Sundararajan, Associate Professor at NYU Stern School of Business and author of The Sharing Economy. And joining us from New York, our Bloomberg News retail reporter, Matt Townsend. So Matt, let's start with you. Tell us how this partnership is actually going to work.
So Walmart is going to be selling its products, which is actually the first time Walmart sold its products outside its own universe, through Google's Google Express. And if you have a Google Assistant at home, which is a voice-activated device, You could say, I need more toilet paper, for example, and the order would directly go through Google's system, and you would get toilet paper shipped to you from Walmart.
Now, Google Express has had its stumbles. There are other vendors on the service: Target, Costco, Bed Bath & Beyond. Arun, how big a threat is this to Amazon?
I think it's a really big threat because you're combining sort of, the AI and device power of Google with the logistics and retailing expertise of Walmart. And I think it's a win-win for both Walmart and for Google. And, right now, you look at the online retail landscape and look a few years ahead, didn't seem to be anybody who posed a really serious threat to Amazon. But when you combine Google's strengths with Walmart's strengths, it's still really early days for online retail. I mean, less than 10% of US retail is online.
And yet, Amazon has spent 20 years laying the groundwork for this. I mean, how much of a head start do they have?
Well, they've certainly got an advantage, right? I mean, they've got the devices in the home, and they've got the 55% of US customers are Prime customers. They've got the logistics expertise, and they've got 20 years of experience. But I think Google's ahead of them on the voice and AI technologies and the intelligent agents that will power retail in the future. And despite Amazon's sort of rapid growth, Walmart is still ahead of them in the basic sort of retailing space.
Now, Matt, Walmart's also working with Uber to deliver groceries in a few cities: Orlando, Dallas. I mean, how do all of these efforts come together?
Well, it's really a big play for everyday essentials. So the Jet.com founder, Mark Lowry, who now oversees all of Walmart's e-commerce, his big idea about the e-commerce space is that for the most part, it's only been a few categories that have gone online in a big way, and grocery and essentials like toilet paper and toothpaste haven't yet. That's what made Jet.com successful, and that's what he wants to do with this relationship with Google and Uber. The Uber relationship is to actually for stores to for Uber to partner with Walmart for online pickup of groceries. And the percentage of sales coming online for, again, groceries and essentials is much lower than, say, apparel. So there is opportunity here for Walmart, which sells a lot of this stuff already, to really make a play and sort of drive growth in this specific category that hasn't gone online as much as other categories.
And in many ways, I mean, this is sort of the central point, right? Because companies like Uber, Amazon to some extent, Postmates, DoorDash, they're sort of indexing physical world stores now, and they're making them searchable. But it's going to be that device at home that is AI powered that's going to be actually matching my I want toilet paper, I want toothpaste, I want socks with the appropriate retailer. And so for Walmart to be inside that device, so to speak, is central to their future. And that's why Amazon's got such a lead, because they've got the store and they've got the device.
So here's my question. I realize a lot of commerce still hasn't gone online, and that is a big opportunity, but how much commerce won't go online? I did a lot of online grocery shopping, but I actually went back to just going back to the store. I don't know, it was just a better experience. I got what I wanted.
Well, I think we'll hit a double-digit percentage this year. We could probably get to 20, 25, 30% over the next decade. A significant fraction is always going to be in person, especially specialty, but it's sort of general retailing. A lot of that will go online. The thing is that the denominator in some sense is so big. I mean, US retail is $5 trillion a year, it's 20 trillion globally. And so that move from 10 to 20%, you're talking about a shift of $500 billion in the US, a few trillion globally. And so there's still a tremendous amount of opportunity here.
All right, Arun Sundararajan, NYU Stern School of Business, and Matt Townsend of Bloomberg News in New York. Thank you both. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. A reminder, we are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That is all for now. This is Bloomberg.